E aí galera, tudo bem? Ivan aqui trazendo para vocês mais uma entrevista de baixo nível, dessa vez com Carey Nordstrand. Quem não conhece, talvez esteja meio desatualizado, pois os captadores da Nordstrand Audio são hoje um dos melhores captadores mais bem falados aí que você encontra não só para vender em baixos custom, né, nos baixos feitos sob encomenda, sob medida, mas também algumas linhas top de marcas famosas como a Ibanez e a Corte têm usado captadores da Nordstrand e são captadores assim. Eu vou colocar aqui uma foto para vocês, por exemplo, dois captadores, você bate o olho e sabe que é Nordstrand. Os captadores que vêm com os polos desalinhados e depois ele inventou as blades, né? Em vez de ser os dois polinhos, uma lâmina. E não sei se ele inventou, mas acredito que sim, tá? Tem a galera aí que é mais nerd de captadores, de pickups e pode me corrigir aí nos comentários. Mas assim, foi muito legal bater um papo com ele. Tinha trocado já algumas ideias com ele, porque ele teve ele descobriu um tumor no pescoço alguns anos atrás, e ali foi uma época que ele estava muito ativo no Facebook e outras redes sociais, e eu fui acompanhando a recuperação dele e quando eu chamei ele para bater esse papo aqui para o meu canal, ele prontamente aceitou e a gente bateu um papo muito legal. Então espero que vocês curtam mais um conteúdo aí, ó, garimpado para essa audiência específica de baixistas, né, que curtem o nosso instrumento, curtem a música, mas que também curtem a parte técnica, a parte de construção, de luthieria, da parte de áudio, tá? E essa parte é muito rica porque ele não começou fazendo captadores ou preamplificadores, não. Ele começou construindo instrumentos musicais. Né? Tanto que o baixo modelo mais recente que ele lançou, que foi o Cat Bass, né? O Sinonix, é um baixo difícil achar aqui no Brasil, porque o mercado dele é o americano, o mercado europeu, tá? Mas é um baixo baseado num outro baixo antigão, assim, mas com toda a eletrônica dele e com vários presets, né? Na elétrica, botõezinhos, tipo aqueles Sonelli antigo que vinham com uns interruptor de luz, sabe? É um baixo que resgata um visual vintage, mas com uma sonoridade bem ampla que vai do vintage até o mais moderno. Acho que vocês vão curtir. Pessoal, não se esqueçam de se inscrever aqui no canal, dar aquele joinha, comentar, isso aumenta a relevância do nosso vídeo aí nessa plataforma louca que é o YouTube, e aqueles que queiram apoiar para que eu continue fazendo, dando um jeito para produzir esses vídeos na minha vida meio maluca, por R$ 2,99 vocês se tornam sócios aí, membros do canal, tá? E tem acesso aos vídeos antecipados e outras coisinhas que a gente vai lançando, como por exemplo poder comprar corda com desconto com o Rodrigo Baixista. Afinal, a gente tem que manter os nossos instrumentos sempre com a corda em dia para poder fazer gravações, shows e etc. Beleza? Então, bora para a entrevista. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation,
Oh,
Carey.
it's my pleasure.
It was, we have a big number of fans here in Brazil, you know?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, people love your pickups.
That's awesome.
It's not easy to find your basses here. I never met one, but
Yeah,
the
shipping thing is
pickups is a pretty hot thing here.
awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, very cool.
And let me introduce myself. My name is Ivan, or Ivan, depends where in the globe you are.
Right.
And I am one of the moderators of the Brazilian Bass Forum. You know, it's a kind of talk bass thing, but in Portuguese. And today is the largest forum in Portuguese. So there are people from Portugal and some African countries too. So it's very nice. And I also run a channel about bass reviews. It was a pandemic's way of escaping from all the madness.
Sure, keep doing something while it's going crazy.
And then became a big thing now, and it's not big numbers, but I became kind of a reference. People go after me to get my opinion about equipment, but I'm not an expert at all. I'm just a veterinarian.
Okay,
who loves to play the bass.
Yeah, you're just excited about bass. Yeah, I mean that's how it starts, right?
I don't work with music, but music helps me to keep my head afloat.
I don't know what I'd do without music, man. Yeah, it's pretty essential.
Yeah, it's this pulse is something that I cannot live without. And I asked it to my colleagues at the bass forum who they wanted me to interview. Since I can speak in English and a little bit of Spanish, I've been trying to make some interview and make content, and then I translate. I put subtitles for other Brazilians to know better about some people. I interviewed already some very nice people, and people get really excited and they learn a lot, so they keep asking for names, and your name came up lots of times. So the first question I would like to make, I of course take a look at your website and Nordstrand Audio, and there's your bio there. So music is really something that came up in your life pretty early, isn't it?
So music for me, started when I was I don't know, I must have been less than 13, but older than 7, because where we were living at the time in Minnesota, and there was an old nylon string guitar down in the basement, and I found it and couldn't believe the sounds. It was this living thing that just seemed really unknowable, really, but very intriguing and inviting. And so that was kind of where the seed stuck. And then just as I got older, music just came to have, it was a way of feeling things that the rest of my life wasn't really conducive to, so it became emotionally important pretty quick at a young age. And so then, we had in elementary school, I think it was grade 4, I started playing saxophone in 4th grade. And I did that up through college. And then I went to a Kenny G concert and I saw Vale Johnson play. And I always like to say I went into the show a sax player and I walked out a bass player, because I saw Vale Johnson just blow my mind. He came up to the front with the drummer. I can't remember who it was in that time. It would have been in the early 90s. And they just did this little thing where, I was, what is going on? So that was where I was like, wow, bass can do so much more than I had any idea. It was just kind of hiding until that point, and then it really kind of jumped out to the front for me. And then I wanted to go to school for recording engineering in there's a school called Grove Center for Contemporary Music. It was the Grove School of Music in Van Nuys, but when I went, it was after the LA riots, and their enrollment had dropped by a lot because I guess foreign students were kind of freaked out about coming here. And then, so I went to school for that for 6 months, and then I worked in a recording studio. This is a really short version of how I got into all this stuff. So I worked in a recording studio for a couple of years, and then I came back out to the suburbs here in Redlands, east of LA, which is where we've been living since 1988. My family moved here in 88. Found work in a little guitar shop, and just sort of started finding my way into doing repairs. There was this instrument that we were making there. The owner of the shop and another guy were doing this instrument called the Traveler guitar, which now is a thing. It's I was involved in the early stages of that. I designed several things for them. I mean, they're 2 miles that way in town here, so they actually used to be in the units that we moved into next door here. So I did that, and then pretty soon realized that mass producing affordable instruments wasn't really my groove. And so I wanted to make myself really nice instruments. And so I backed out of the traveler thing, and then I ended up finding a job with Steve Azzola, who makes electric upright, used to. This would have been around 96 to 98. I was working for Steve Azzola down in San Marcos for 2 years. And then I got into Sir guitars from that job, because Sir was doing some CNC job work potentially for Azzola.
It was the early years of CNC.
Yes, yes. This was back when you couldn't have, like, a guy like me couldn't have a $10,000 machine in the back of his shop. They were,
of course not,
100 grand. They were professional machines. It wasn't accessible to everybody, the average guy yet. So, but then in 2006, I did buy a CNC machine. I'm doing an interview. I can sign that real quick though. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry, you'll have to cut this out. But we got to pay for that giant shipment that just showed.
All right.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, then I worked for John Sir for 4 years, and that was I was just a vacuum soaking up everything I could. They were very small. Go ahead.
No, I was wondering if it was not only the craftsmanship, but also how to create a business. Because that's something that when we see your website, it's very professional. It's not only building instruments, it's making a brand, making products and expanding, going to pickups, preamps, and new basses. So this is not only the craftsmanship, puts cut the woods and wiring things. There is a business mind also in there.
Well, so I'm not a naturally born business-minded person by any stretch. So this has been a learn as you go thing. But yeah, when I worked for Sir, I learned some things that I wanted to do, and I learned a healthy amount of what I didn't want to do as well. And so small companies can be very complicated, confusing places to be sometimes, especially when they're, privately owned. And so yeah, there was a lot of learning going on there in the skill department, and then in the, how do I do and not do. But there was always an intent to have my own business from very early, from the traveler guitar days. It was just, how do I get from here to having my own thing and being able to do what I want to do and not what other people tell me to do. So it took a while to get to that point, but I had started acquiring tools and things as far back as when I was working for Steve Azzola. So after 4 years at Sir, I bought a house in closer to where we had lived here in Redlands, up in a town called Yucaipa. It had 3-car garage in it. And I bought a house, and I quit my job. So I set up in my garage. Yeah. So here I am with a brand new house payment and a garage full of tools. And I think at that point, I had 2 or 3 bass orders that I was working on filling, custom bass orders. And pretty soon I was back ordered within over a year. Within 6 months, I was a year plus out on my orders. So it went well quickly. Talk bass was a huge part of it. Yeah, right. Talk bass. I was very active on talk bass in the early years. And it was kind of a neater place back then. I haven't been there in a long time, so I'm not one to speak about what it's like now. But back then there was a lot more wisdom and less knowing. So people telling you what's right, what they know is right, and there was a lot more sort of helpful stuff. I'm not familiar with what it's like these days, but I haven't been around there in a long time. I don't go there. For me, it's all social media now. But that was huge. That was just starting. It was, these forums and internet was just coming around. I learned a ton on the internet because it was like 98. I got my first real computer, and I started scouring websites for just random pictures of studios. And I'd go, what is that machine in the back? And I'd try to figure it out, you know, and just, I was voraciously consuming anything I could that had anything to do with how to make an instrument. So, and then pickups, you know, the deal was, once I started and got set up in my shop, and I wanted to make a 6-string bass with dual coil pickups, and where the heck do I get that? So I reached out to Seymour Duncan. Aero pickups was a thing that was just on the radar back then. There was Bartolini, there's DeMars. There wasn't a lot of options.
Yeah.
So I had learned how to make pickups, kind of a very basic, you know, single coils and humbuckers while I was at SUR. And I got a little hand winding machine, and I was hand cutting the fiber on routers with little templates that I made. But I managed to make a set of dual coil pickups that I put in the bass. And this is funny too, because, you know, back then I didn't really have any conviction that I knew much about tone and sound. So I was really kind of guessing about how these pickups should sound, or how much wire and how many magnets, and all the pieces of the formula were unknown at that time. It was loosely based on a couple of J pickups stuck together under a cover, right? It's a dual coil. And it was all the rage from the Federa thing at the time. So I had to make dual coils. So I made some dual coils. And then other builders, there was this little community firing up on TalkBass. Then other small builders like me went, oh, that guy can make pickups. I wonder if he'll sell them to me. And so I was like, yeah, whatever I can do to keep this whole madness going. And so I think I had hired a person. I hired a guy right away within 9 months that first year. And we started, I got a really amazing deal on a computerized Tanak winding machine. It was like an industrial surplus. So I paid like a quarter of what they cost new. And then I got a laser machine, and then it was off to the races. All right, how many different, we got to make Strat pickups, we got to make P bass, J, dual coils. Big singles were born out of that. All right, now I got a big fat cover. How do I fill that cover up with something more than just a J pickup, which is just linear? And I had this insight one morning while I was in the shower. I was like, oh, what if you just turn the pole pieces 45 degrees, the coil's fatter?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to capture an interesting sound from the string, because now it's asymmetrical. You're not getting the same thing on both sides. So you get this complex, rich, big sound. And man, I couldn't get downstairs fast enough to turn that laser on and cut those out and see how it sounded. So, and that actually started, I was heavily influenced by F-Bass at the time.
Very creative. Yeah.
Oh, incredible. I met George Furlanetto at I think it was the 2004 NAMM show. Let me turn my stupid email off. This is really irritating. So I met it was the 2004 NAMM. Where was I? I got lost.
When you met Furlanetto.
Yeah, George Furlanetto at the NAMM show. And so he was doing stacked pickups, but they were just J style, but with really longer magnets than typical J pickup.
Yeah, like the one Alain Caron uses. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's two coils, one on top of each other. And then what I did was take that basic format and with my angled poles, and that's the fat stack. That was the first angled pole piece pickup that I made in my garage.
Yeah, and what
mixer, whatever it was.
It was it was a huge success, you know. Yeah.
You know, it blows my mind that we've probably made 5 figures worth of those by now for Ibanez, 10,000 or more pickups.
Yeah.
Over the intervening, I mean, we started working with Ibanez in 2008. Yeah. We started communicating in about 2006.
First with the Prestige series.
Right. The Prestige, and then they had the Premium, which had the Bartolinis, and then we were in the Prestige line, and then then we did some licensed stuff for them. Mm-hmm. They had a PJ configuration that they did for quite a while. It's a soap RJ, but not a DJ. And then we got into, they came with an idea for a hum canceling pickup, and so we met and we sort of co-designed this big break pickup, which they're putting on a lot of their instruments these days. So without that relationship, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah, sure. they reached you, or you went for it?
So what happened was they reached out to me, but I had a lot of these small builders who were doing what I was doing and getting pickups from me because there wasn't really anybody else doing it.
Okay.
It started to kind of sneak into the high-end endorser place. There was a builder in Philadelphia named Tim Clunan who had a company called Callow Hill, and he actually worked for Hoshino in Pennsylvania for a bit. And so he knew a lot of the artists in the Ibanez roster, and they would reach out to him for personal work on their personal instruments, not necessarily Ibanez, but just because they knew that he knew what the heck he was doing. And before long, he starts installing our pickups in their basses, and they're asking for them. And pretty soon, it's going back around the other way. The artists are going to Ibanez and saying, hey, what about these pickups? Everybody's curious about these pickups. Can I do an artist model with these pickups? That kind of a thing starts happening. So yeah, that's how that kind of grew into a kind of a critical mass and Ibanez has always kind of been a forward-thinking company.
Yeah.
They're not particular. I mean, a company that large is not going to be fast at anything, frankly, but so it took a long time for things to happen, several years from initial discussion to now their instruments are for sale with our products in them. I can remember going to the local Guitar Center the first time and seeing an Ibanez on the wall with that little N logo on it. And it was just like, what the hell is going? It was mind blowing. So yeah, that's kind of how that went. So
I have already played in several basses with Nordstrand pickups, and they just sound amazing. The definition, low end, and recording with these pickups it's just sounds great, man. Sounds great. Awesome. Congratulations for your work.
Very glad.
That's something that I wanted to say to you. People here love your pickups there. And in fact, even in the forum here, one of my colleagues he asked me if his nickname is Jazzigo, and he asked if the website Nordstrand Pickup is still on or just Nordstrand Audio, because he wants to buy a pickup and the website is out.
Oh, so we had an issue about a week ago where the website went down.
Okay.
And so Nordstrand Pickups, we changed the branding to Nordstrand Audio because pickups
it's much more than now.
Pickups was too small. Yeah, pickups was too small. I mean, when we started doing this.
Yeah, I want to talk about this. Yeah.
We'll get to that. Yeah, but yeah. So I had all these other ideas that the Starlifter preamp too. I mean that kind of fits into the pickups space, but we need something bigger. And audio was the direction that I wanted to go, because I'd like to get into studio gear as well, just that, whatever's fun and sounds good. I just like that. I'm always curious about new things and what can we discover. So
you mentioned that you were pretty active in Talkbase, but there are some other things that might be going on, because you started to make basses, of course, kind of jazz precision oriented basses, but with some twists, your twist. But of course, the market in the US was kind of, at that time in the 90s, in the late 80s, 90s, people were kind of tired of jazz basses, precision
vintage
basses.
Instruments were not that hot when I started.
Yeah.
That's correct. Which is why when I started, I did this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This is my NJ model.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that I made for myself, I think in 2008. And I actually lasered my signature into the 24th fret there. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Right there. But so I scanned it. That was right after I got my laser machine. It's funny because my signature does not look like that anymore. But that's what I started. started building, you know, my own designs, and then the fender shaped objects came later, when I realized that, no offense to picky customers who order custom basses, but picky customers who order custom basses are a lot of work. And it's a lot easier to make instruments that people look at them and they have a frame of reference and they don't expect absurd things from that instrument, because it's obvious what it is and what it's trying to do. When you make stuff that's can be, you know, in concept whatever the customer wants, that's a lot of work. So I had to get out of the custom thing and that time suck thing, and that was what led to the fender shaped instruments. But it was a great progression, because that's where I really started to get tone and understand the foundations of bass tone. So
and during this time also, bass tones were also changing because of the new preamps that were showing up, and of course the big movement in New York with Podera, Ken Smith, Sadowski, and they were bringing new, you know, more sweet, mellow tones to the bass. You know, a lot of
it was all about modern, like
soloists,
solo artists. It was about like modern, wide range. I don't know, kind of it took the bass from just bass all into all these other places, you know, with these sort of modern solo artist instruments that really became a thing in the late 80s and early 90s. You know, the solo bass player, I mean, it wasn't even a thing really that much before that whole era, when people started getting into, you know, custom instruments, and you know, everybody wanted their Federa Anthony Jackson style bass, you know,
even in LA.
Yeah. I mean the diehards, you know, there's a certain part of the industry here that just, I mean, it's gotten a lot smaller over the last 20 years, but there's a certain part of the recording industry that just keeps doing what it does. You know, they keep using Fenders, and it's, you know, it's much bigger than that. But yeah, that core of LA is always been there, because there's been a part of the music industry that needs that type of thing. But it's funny, because in the 2000s everything turned back, you know, vintagey, like the mid 2000s,
post grunge, you know.
So I came in right at the end of that sort of exotic handmade thing. I mean, we didn't know it at the time. You know, right before the Great Recession hit in like 2008, people were buying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 basses like candy. It was, everybody had all this, you know, this equity in their house, and they're like, a bass, no problem, another bass, no problem. So it was like, wow, it was nuts. It was a really interesting time to be a maker, and people were just buying basses left and right. So it was a good time to get started, because it gave you a lot of opportunities that might not have been there otherwise.
And what about preamps? It was just a opportunity, since you were already making pickups, or were you searching more, tonal changes? And
there was a few preamps at the time that were kind of out there. There was Aguilar, there was EMG, Bartolini, of course.
How do you define a good preamp?
Well, yeah, let me get to that.
Tricky question.
Not really. The relationship I had with George Furlanetta was pretty good, because in the beginning he would sell me his onboard preamps too, his 3-band boost only onboard transistor based preamps, which were so musical. I mean, you know, that's one of the cool things about an F bass, is that you can turn the knobs any direction, and it's hard to make it sound bad. It just, the preamp is so non-destructive and additive, so it doesn't, you can't mess up your sound super easy with an F bass. Whereas, no offense, Aguilar, but with an Aguilar preamp, you turn that bass knob all the way up and you don't touch anything else, and it's a lot. It's a
The
lot to
sound
deal with.
wave goes woof.
Exactly. It's like 18 or 20 dB of boost at 40 or whatever it is. I don't know the exact spec, but man, it's like, where's the rest of the sound? And so I wanted something that was kind of between the F bass, which to me was sort of like a Sadowski two band, kind of in that vein. It was like, just add the mid range. I was all about mid range back then, as a lot of people were, in that sort of custom bass. I need to control everything time. But so I wanted to have a more musical and usable control set with less crazy gain. I wanted to have it be harder to screw up your sound with the onboard preamp. And so I ended up designing my own. I had learned a little bit about that when I worked for Sir, and there wasn't much. You couldn't just go look up a schematic on the internet. You had to look up 100 schematics and figure out which parts of each one worked. And I had this Spice circuitry simulation software at the time, and I could run scans. Like, I could put a signal sweep into it, and it would show me the response curve, just all in the virtual world. So I could change my resistors and capacitors and sort of figure out what frequencies gave me, or what values gave me what frequencies. And then so I was able to figure out a whole swappable frequency set through different capacitors that you could add externally to the preamp, so you could tune your mid-range frequency. But this was about 2006, and it was about 6 months of intensive, deep R&D trying to figure out how to make an onboard preamp that works well, sounds good, is musical.
Try and error? Try and error? Or were you... It was learning by your mistakes.
It was about as pure of a trial and error situation as you could get into designing something electronics, because I really didn't have. I had some basic understanding of electronics, but I didn't go to school for it at all. And it was, and I mean, I kind of do this with a lot of things. Is if I got to figure it out, I do a deep dive, and I look everywhere, and I just obsessively consume as much information as I can, and then a lot of times. And in that time, I learned a lot, because I had to get it done, because we released the preamps, and there was some problems with them with the first edition that we released. So I had to correct the circuit issues. And I was like in the trenches, like, oh my God, how am I going to fix this before too many people find out what's going wrong with these preamps? And so I just remember it as being this head down, circuits everywhere, soldering endlessly. I actually built one preamp that was no circuit board. It was all point to point, like a 3D sculpture of my preamp, just for testing, and because it was cool too. But it was pretty wild. And then when we got to making the Star Lifter about 10 years ago, that was part of a partnership with Jeff Gensler. And so they're actually made in his factory in Taiwan that he uses. And his designer, Scott, took my onboard preamp. Well, I had actually sort of tweaked the preamp into a pedal design that had a plus and minus power rail. And then Mission Creep took it away from, it made it more expensive and complicated than I was able to handle. So and then Scott was available at the right time, and Jeff had room in his schedule to get these into production. And so then I sent that onboard preamps to him, and he actually verified that there was actually a pretty decent design, clean, quiet, musical. And so then they turned them into, we had been doing through holes. We were buying circuit boards and all the components and just soldering them together and testing them. But then we went to having them made, I think they're made in Korea. And he was the one that designed and helped implement that situation. So that's kind of how the preamp game.
And were you following your own instincts, your own ear, or at the time you were always asking for colleagues or the bass players to check, or I don't know, engineers to check the sound if it's okay, testing the market, or just intuition?
as much as I could, and as much access as I had to anybody who would listen to this stuff, I would definitely put it in people's hands. But I didn't know that many players back then. So a lot of it was, I mean, outside of my little, social circle and the people that worked for me and the people that they knew, and a handful of people who were starting to, come on as customers and be engaged and involved and curious. It was really, though. So I went to school for recording, right, back in the day when I was, like I was talking about earlier, and I've always been interested in really, sound, music, and space, and the sound of space, and engineering, and sound quality, and the emotional experience of a really incredible sounding recording and delivery and everything. So I that's kind of what I guess served me well when I started designing products, was that my ears, I mean, I was guessing, but I was guessing mostly correctly, because it turns out a lot of people like what I like, So it's just been trying to find what I like to hear in the products that we develop and put in the market, and just basically getting better at making that journey shorter. So you start developing and designing a product, and it takes you 5, 10 iterations until you get it to where, all right, I like this. The key is, you finish something, you sit down, and you plug it in. You play that first note, and oh, okay. And then you start exploring. And then if you don't look up for 10 or 15 minutes without really thinking about what you're doing, you're just following the sounds. Oh, what about this? Oh, what about that? Then you look up and you go, oh, okay, I think we got something, because I haven't been thinking about how good it sounds. I've just been exploring what it sounds like. And so that's where the trick is, to me, is in that being open to the experience of what you created, and seeing how it pulls on you, or gets you invested in spending your time. So
that's why your name is in the brand, Nordstrand. It's your soul in it. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I have to ask you something. I don't have the pro account for Zoom, so my recording
okay.
will
Do we need
stop.
to restart?
Yeah, can I send
Okay.
you another link
Absolutely.
for you?
Yep.
Then we talk
sure.
about this little cat there.
Okay.
Okay, I'll send
Yeah,
you by email.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Recording. Great. So from learning how to build basses and wiring pickups and exploring new sounds with preamps, then you brought us some. It's about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. You
Yeah.
first
So
bass.
it was about 3 years ago.
Because let me just make a comment here, because I popped you on Facebook, I guess, right in that moment of your life that you find out a lump in your neck, and you went through this health condition, and it was I follow you at the time, and it was, I was pretty happy that you passed through this, and I saw your new car, fancy one, and all the changes you passed it. So, and then I saw the
Synonyx, yeah.
yeah, coming up. So it was really nice to see all these things,
So 2020 was a pretty insane year for me. I mean, it was pretty insane for a lot of people because the pandemic started, right? But
yeah.
So there was the NAMM show that year, and that was the year I had a handful of cat bases at the NAMM show. Gosh, I'm gonna have to go back and look through all my pictures and sort of put together a timeline, because the pandemic made everything kind of mashed. It's all confusing.
Indeed.
What started when and when it ended, But yeah, I was at that NAMM show, and I had that lump in my neck, right? And people responded. I had a handful of instruments that I had made at the show, I mean, 3 or 4 of them, and people responded to them incredibly well. So it was actually the 2019. Okay, this is how it went. 2019 was the year I brought the first couple that I had made. Bob Glob came by the booth at the show. So he was really interested in one and wanted to buy one. He played it and was kind of blown away. And so then we sort of made a deal after the show. So he purchased one of the ones that I made, and then the other one I made ended up with a friend here in town. And then actually, he's the guy that I started the restaurant with, which did not survive the pandemic either. So that was going down too. That the restaurant was just madness time. So by 2020, there was a bit of buzz going, and Bob had his for a year and was using it on all kinds of sessions and giving me feedback here and there. And the same time, I had one and I was playing it, and sort of my mind was starting to open up to what it could do. And 2020, I was home, once March hit, and then I managed to get into the doctor, and they biopsied the lump. This was about April, and then they let me know that they didn't find anything in the biopsy. So okay, we're gonna surgically remove it. Okay, cool. We go in for the surgery, maybe a couple weeks after they biopsy, maybe a month after they biopsy. They cut me from here to here, and they take it out, and it was
I remember
a swollen lymph node, right?
Yeah.
So they pull it out, and then they put a tube in so that surgery can heal and drain. And I go back in a couple of weeks later, and they pulled the tube out, and then the doctor tells me I had cancer. Like, I was not expecting that. I was like, he's gonna pull the tube out, I'm done, I'm down the road.
Yeah, that's the problem of cancer, because it's a huge mass of tissue. So it depends where the first biopsy was a kind of liquid biopsy with a needle, and now I'm talking like a vet. So,
yeah.
And then sometimes you have to get the more parts of the tissue, to really
find it,
have an idea what's going on there. So
So he pulled the tube out, told me I had cancer, pulled me into the exam room, put a camera in there, and said, look, there's a spot on the back of your tongue. And so we're going to cut that off. Oh, that sounds fun. And then we're going to do chemo and radiation. Okay. So that was my 2020. And so I didn't get to the chemo and radiation until September, like late August, we started. And the first shipment of cat bases arrived in, I think, July that year. And so I was at home all the time.
You have to set it up.
We have to go through each one of
the bodies and
Yep. Every base needs to be gone through. And of course, when you're getting instruments from a factory, there's going to be issues with the first batch. I don't care how good the factory is. There's going to be problems. So we had some wiring issues that we needed to sort out on every single base. So we had 200 instruments that showed up on that first batch, and I think they were almost all sold by the time the batch got here, because we were pre-selling them that time. So then we just had to execute and ship the bases out. And this is all happening, and they're selling, and all this is going on in 2020. And because of the pandemic, people are buying pickups and bases like crazy, because they're just sitting at home and they want something to do, right? They want to get better at music, make recordings and whatever. And this is turned out to be a killer bass. The timing was insane. So yeah, that was 2020. The bass came out, it was a smash hit. I'm sitting there at home, basically with my head in the ground, trying to survive this cancer situation and just put one foot in front of the other. And the pandemic's raging, and I am just awash and feeling taken care of by the response to this instrument. It was a really amazing time. So that was the first year of factory basses showing up and just running out the door.
A lot of things happen at the same time.
Amazing. Yeah, and then the artists start finding it. Artists that some of them you don't even know. I mean, people in like famous rock bands. I saw a sale come through on because I get a notification. I was like, oh, who's that? Oh, wow, that guy bought one. Cool. Like, that's awesome. And then they start reaching out to us. I mean, and then all this sort of culminated, before the holidays, and I went out and Pino Palladino texted me and said,
Oh.
I got your number from Steve Jordan. Steve Jordan's like calls me, and he's like, I was hanging out with Bob Glob, and he showed me this bass, and I gotta have one. I gotta have one. And then he's like, and then Pino told me
I bet
about
it's
it.
huge.
Yeah.
He's big, you know.
He's a big dude. Yeah, yeah. It looks tiny on him, but man, he's gonna make it sound crazy good. So this relationship with Pino has started, and I mean, there's things that we talked about that I can't even. I'm not ready to bring up yet, but it's pretty exciting.
I can imagine Pino with a fretless. I can really imagine him with a cat.
That's the next thing we're bringing in.
Fretless cat bass, man.
We've got 10 necks out at the painter right now, and as soon as we get them back, I'm putting one together for him. I'm gonna bring it down. Wow. That'll be destructive. Yeah, yeah. We've got some other things coming along too. I mean, the 3 single coil thing. This is proving to be very popular. People are pretty excited about this.
Yeah,
we should
it's a strat-like thing, you know. Sorry, there's this mosquito
we should be able to start
going crazy here.
Yep, it's pretty nice. Hopefully, we can start shipping these next week. We're doing a batch of 10 to start. So then I actually want to do. There's going to be a couple of fretless of those too. So this is going to go.
It's a 33-inch or
30.7. So
30.7.
So the cat was designed on an Italian bass made in the 60s, the Goya Panther, right?
Yeah.
So that's where a Synonyx is. I was looking for a cat name to use to call the bass, and all the cat names are used for pretty much everything. So a Synonyx is the genus for cheetah. And so it was the best I could do. Plus it was interesting, and nobody knows how to pronounce it, so you don't forget it, even if you can't pronounce it. So and then we just call them cat basses. But yeah, the original one was a 30.7-inch scale length, like a 1.4-inch nut width, 17 millimeter spacing at the bridge. And Juan Aldretti was a huge part of how I discovered the Goya, and then realized that maybe I should make a modern adapted version. And then at the same time, we were getting into a relationship with Strandberg, the Fanfret small instruments. They were wanting pickups, and they were working with a factory in Indonesia, the Court factory. And so their warehouse guy, who's partner with them out here in Riverside, he was telling me about the Court factory and how it was like the best factory going these days. And so I had this idea for this bass while I'm learning about, hey, maybe we could have this made over in this Court factory. And I showed it to this fella who worked for Strandberg, and I said, what do you think we could get this done for over there? And about this much? He said, yeah, probably. And so it's designed to be really easy to make in a factory. There's no routes on the back of it. Yeah. So when you put a CNC machine to cut it, you only have to do the top. Yeah. You don't have to do the back. And then the way the pick guard's designed, it's not super finicky on fit. So it's easier to slide together and line up nice so that everything looks tight. So they're pretty easy to make, design, to build, to machine and make. And that was, so the pricing worked out, and then it was like, wow, okay, I guess maybe we should try to do this. So I made some samples and made a factory sample for the factory, and it was pretty crude, but it had what they needed. And I sent it over to them, and I sent the CAD files, and then, 9 months later, they sent me, that was 2020 was the first factory sample bases I had. That's what that was.
You just send the CAD files in and get the
CAD files and a sample base, and then about 3-4 months later, 6 months later, a couple of sample instruments show up. Actually, one instrument showed up. My daughter has it. It has 4 bolts on the neck instead of 3, because these factories will change things without your approval, because that's how they've done it forever and ever. And I was like, no, 3 bolts, get rid of that 4th one. So there's 1 4-bolt cat bass in the world, and my daughter has it.
Oh, great.
It's the original factory sample. So yeah.
And 3 bolts is enough.
It for a short scale, it really is.
Because I made a review of a Hitta bass, and I had a chance to interview Jens Hitta for my channel last year, And I asked him, why 10 bolts? It was a 5-string bass. Oh, why 10
What did he say?
bolts?
What did he say?
And he said, man, I want the things go strong and solid. And but he's the artist, so, and like you're the artist, so
I think emphasis on artist, because 10 bolts is,
yeah,
you're adding extra weight to that instrument. You're adding extra expense. You're adding all kinds of things. Art, fine. Functional bass, please. 10 bolts? Come on.
10 bolts.
That's absurd. Really. How many basses have we made over the last 50 years with 4 bolts that work? 10.
It's still working, yeah. And costs a fortune. It costs a car.
Well, yeah, here's another thing. George, one of the early conversations I had with George from F Bass was, he said, we tried, they were testing basses, 4 bolts, 5 bolts, 3 bolts, 6 bolts, whatever. They figured they sound best with 4 bolts. So I was like, it's enough for me. All right, let's go less.
Yeah,
not 10. Let's try to get, we can probably get away with 2, to be honest. So there's a ton of acoustic guitars that have 2 screws to hold the neck on. Like that's normal. And acoustic guitars have more tension than basses.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So
besides the playability of a smaller bass, and it makes easier for guitar players to go to, they're in the studio during a session, they can, reach out to a cat bass and create from there. What about the tonal range, the tonal ideas you were expecting from such a bass? What was the things you wanted to avoid from a kind of Mustang type thing bass?
So, I mean, the reference, the starting point was, Juan had lent me one of his Goya Panthers, and so that had
you had a chance to play one of these.
I had one. We actually repaired it. He left it here.
Okay.
The mechanical switches were funky, and it got dinged in a case and shipping somewhere, and so some of the stuff got bent. So he asked us to fix the switches. So I pulled it apart, and it was just a matter of sort of bending things back into place and sort of resecuring things, and then we put it back together. But I sat down and played it for a bit, and I went, whoa, there's some interesting sounds in this instrument. So then that was kind of the starting point. Okay, let's make this and see how it compares to an original Goya. But then it was, how am I going to do the switching? How am I going to do my version? I'm not going to make mechanical switches like these crazy old Goyas. That would have been insanely expensive to do, especially in small batches like these. So I found the old 1176 compressor switches, which is a ubiquitous studio compressor, and they're famous for that all-in mode. They got 4 ratio setting switches for the compression ratio, 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 8-to-1. They're different settings for different models, but if you push them all in, it engages basically an infinite compression, infinite to 1. So it just is an absolute smashes the sound, and you get a bunch of crazy distortion. Anyway, the idea of all in was like, what can we do with that on this instrument then? So pretty quickly it was like, okay, both pickups, neck pickup, bridge pickup off. That was something that Juan wanted, because when he was doing effects pedals, he wanted to be able to go, turn it on, off, to kind of do that stutter-y effect, right? But then, okay, what can we do with all 4 down? Let's put them in series and see how that sounds. And then we had the 4 switches for the tones, and I thought, well, I can do flat and then a regular tone knob rolled off, which is what the first tone setting is. And then I thought, what if we go extra dark on it just to see what that sounds like? And then the 4th setting, okay, what about that one? Okay, a passive notch, not so much a scoop, but a notch. So it's not scooping the mids out, but it's a little notch. It just pulls some of the mids out, and sometimes it can sit in a mix a little bit easier, because it makes more space for other instruments. But the first time I plugged the bass in, put all 4 switches in, and then put it in that 3rd setting, and then turn the tone, the tone all the way down, and series mode, that's the sound that that Bob Glaub fell in love with when he first got this instrument, to the degree that I was calling it the Bob Glaub setting, for a long time because it's just like a dark synthy sub fat. It's all bass, and it's just, it gets you right in the gut. And it's my favorite setting to play when I play with, you know, my friends here in my studio, and when I record. It's hard to not get sucked into that sound and get addicted to it and make it, build your track around it, because it's such a compelling sound.
It is. I
Yeah.
I will ask you for you if you can send me later some of if you know any tune and any record that has been recorded with the cat bass, then I can share and can put here
Oh,
in
there's
the
a bunch of
in the
them.
link. Yeah.
It's all over the new Jackson Browne record that Bob did a couple years ago.
Okay.
It's on the new Bonnie Raitt record. It's on the title track for the new Bonnie Raitt record, and probably 3 or 4 other tracks on that record. Yeah, the list of like studio professional releases
it's hard to.
is on. It's on so many songs already. It's mind blowing how
It's fantastic, isn't it?
embraced by the recording world this instrument has been. It really.
And the headstock, it's not like the Goya.
It's not, but it's kind of inspired. The Goya is 4 on the side.
Yeah.
Right. They're all on the bass side here. But the G string tuner on the Goya, the string rubs against the D string tuner, because they didn't have any concept of that might be an issue when you're trying to tune the instrument. That drag might make it hard to keep it in tune. So I said, no, I got to have as straight a string pull as I can. And then I thought, this is going to freak people out if I do 1 and 3, and they're not going to be able to forget it, kind of like the name. And it's borderline ugly. A lot of people are, when I was designing this, you know, back in 2000, geez, it would have been 18, 19, people were like, that headstock is hideous. But it was just fine. Like, you know, I got a lot. Some people would love it.
I'm the artist. Fuck
so
you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's where I had to land in order to keep it going. I can't let people like shove my ideas around like that, because otherwise you lose the whole picture.
Of course.
Right? The complete thing. It's not just a headstock. It's a whole instrument. So and that pulls it together, and it just kind of, yeah, it's you're not going to miss it on a stage. You're going to see that funky looking headstock, and you're going to know what it is. And to me, that's more important than the fact that somebody might think it's ugly. So, you know, once in a while. But a lot of people, once they saw the full instrument, they're like, oh, yeah, the headstock's rad. I get it. It works. So
that's great. That's great. So, new ideas for the next 10 years? Can you share some of craziness?
Yes. Well, so we got the 3 single coil cat, which I have this concept right now that, you know, cats have 9 lives. So we got 1, and that's 2. Yeah. So you think there might be 7 more models that I'm going to want to get through by the time we're done with this whole line. I'd like to do guitars. I'd like to do a bass 6 style instrument. I'd like to do a baritone. I've got a Dan Electro long neck in the other 6-string bass in the other bass 6, basically in the other room, that I'm going to use as a model to sort of build up some more concepts for these things. There's some other pickup options that we're working on. When I designed this, there's a big, huge swimming pool route in here. So the intent was, this is just the first of these. As long as things go well, we'll do more of them. So we're already into the 3 single coil thing. There's some hum canceling pickups that we're working on in the original 2 pickup configuration. There could be some onboard effects that might come along at some point.
A drive.
Well, when you think about what Pino's into in terms of effects,
chorus.
That might be a hint where we're looking.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, and then I have some new pickup ideas, not cat bass related, that are coming down. I'm doing so it's my 20th year anniversary since I started business, right? So I'm doing a handful of instruments over the course of the year and making them available just through my social media. This is kind of pretty informal, but I just want to kind of revisit some of my favorite things that I've made over the years and I'd like to make myself a few new instruments. So, but I have a new pickup model that we're working on that will have it'll be inspired by the wall pickups.
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be one coil per string on each
Oh,
string,
okay.
each pickup. And in our testing, this is really the first public
That's
admission that
great.
this
That's
is going
great.
on. So you got a scoop here.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been murmuring about it with some of the people that have been interested in buying these instruments, just to tell them what they're going to get when the thing is done. But yeah, the idea is to have, each coil has one string, and so in the testing that we've done so far, you get this string to string definition and note clarity across the instrument that I mean, yeah, it reminds me of the wall basses that I had a chance to play Justin Chancellor's wall bass too for a minute. He was around for a little while, several years ago, sniffing around. It didn't quite work out the way you'd hope, but it is what it is. But anyway, the idea of this, so I kind of got the sense of what that sound is about when I was playing around with that, and this new pickup, it's an Alnico based pickup, and it's not like the wall pickups. It's sort of our version. So there's a lot to really sort of sort out yet, but in our initial testing, it's pretty great. And we're going to have hopefully a whole system of preamps that you can use post pickup and in passive, like per string settings and switchings that you can do. So if you want to tweak stuff, this will be a great platform for that. But the idea is to make it so that you open up the control cavity, you make your tweaks, and then the actual controls that are on the bass that you use on a day-to-day basis are not as complicated. And so you pick your preferences, and then you roll down the road with the controls and those preferences. But you can always open the instrument up and sort of tweak things and try to find your home tonally. But so there's going to be some fun stuff in the next year or two when that starts coming along.
That's great.
Yeah.
And one last question: how should a bass player who is trying to make an upgrade in a regular bass, just like a jazz or precision, if he wants to, what a bass player should take in account when combining pickups and preamps? Because sometimes this is, for me, this is, I know it's not really rocket science, it's about feel, but normally we bass players, we don't have enough time or or the possibility to test the combinations between pickups and preamps. Could you give any clue about what should we look for, or to stick with the same brands, or mixing brands, Seymour Duncan pickups and Aguilar, preamp? It's a good thing or not a good thing? Not about the brands, but mixing brands, because that's something, this is a gray zone for me, it's so, I don't know what to expect when I put a new pickup here in Brazil. When you buy a pickup from the States, it's very expensive.
It's like buying a bass almost.
Yeah. So then you buy, and it's not what you had in mind. So
well, I mean, this is kind of the fundamental question of how do you sell pickups? How do you get people what they want when you don't even really know what it is, when they don't even really know what it is that they want,
For sure.
Well,
the customer is the most ignorant.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, I don't like thinking that I know exactly everything all the time anyway. So it usually the best way to go is when somebody comes to us, if they can give us an example of another player or an artist that they're into tonally and sonically. We have a pretty good ability to sort of delineate, like if you give us some sound samples or some recordings, or you know, I want to sound like that guy, but maybe with a little bit of that guy, and I want to be able to do this. Yeah, I mean, that's why we have Stu here, and you know, all of the I mean, Stu famously will give you a really long, detailed answer about your pickup question, about what about this sound and what about that sound. And so I think that's one of the assets that we have, is there's a lot of players here who really get what we do and have come to really know it deeply over the last 10 years plus that they've worked for us. I mean, Stu's been here since 2000. I mean, goodness, 15 years now. And Adrian's been here for over 10 years. I mean, I got people that have been here for a long time, and we really know the product deeply. So when someone reaches out, as long as you can give me some direction, point to something and say, I want to be that or like that or like that, usually we can get you in the right direction. We don't get a lot of, yeah, I tried that and it didn't work for me pickup, you know. Oh, okay. Usually we're pretty good about hitting the target on the first try. So
Okay.
it's just about communicating. It's really about communicating what you want, and the words that we use. I mean, that's extra challenging when you're coming across you know, a language barrier as well. But
Yeah.
I mean, and hopefully this is where you obviously doing what you're doing are really going to be able to help a lot of the people down there.
Yeah,
In Brazil.
that's my goal.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
and if one of my colleagues in the forum wants to reach out to you and discuss pickups on preamps, they just go to Nordstrand pickups or Nordstrand audio.
Nordstrand Audio. I think
Audio.
Nordstrand pickups should redirect. We still own the
Yeah.
name, but I'm not sure. I mean, again, the website was a little wacky last week.
Okay.
We had to migrate it from an old server to a new one because the service that we had, you'd send them an email and their customer service. You might get an email in a week.
No shit.
That's, you can't run a business like
Yeah.
that. So we found a new company, but it took us several days to really get it to propagate it to all the servers and be stable again.
This customer service you provided if people wants to reach out to you, and okay.
I mean, the email load that we have is pretty significant sometimes.
I believe.
So it makes more sense if you can do everything that you can to find your answers before you come to us. But if you can't find your answers that you're happy with, then definitely come to us. Send us emails. We're somewhat accessible on social media. I'm accessible on social media, but it's a long shot if you're going to hear back from me, just because I'm so busy. Just because there's some, I mean, you know what's going on. So
I totally understand.
yeah. But the email, I mean, we usually get through the emails within a day or two when they come in. So and then, you know, if people email us and don't hear for whatever reason, somebody can hit me up directly and I'll go, hey, did you guys? Oh yeah, we're working on that. Okay. So we will definitely do our best, but email is the easiest way because, you know, we can reply at will instead of, you know,
of course, yeah,
phone calls under pressure and all that. So
okay, Carey, thank you so much for your time. I believe it was a great talk. You know, this kind of format, it's amazing because we chat, we discuss, we sometimes go kind of philosophical too, and
I'm all about that stuff,
and
man.
I believe the Brazilian audience or the Portuguese speaking audience will be glad to understand the soul behind Nordstrand audios.
Awesome.
And
well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out to me and doing this. I like doing this kind of stuff. I enjoy talking about these things. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you and take care.
All right, we'll see you.
See you.
Bye.
Isso aí, galera. Espero que vocês tenham curtido mais uma entrevista aqui no Baixos Baixarias, assim, conteúdo garimpado para vocês que amam o nosso instrumento. E de novo, como eu falo inglês ali, dou aquela arranhada boa, né? E aqui não é propaganda de curso de inglês, mas foi algo que eu tive o privilégio de estudar, minha família pôde me proporcionar. Então eu uso essa habilidade que eu tenho para trazer esse conteúdo legal para vocês, com legendas em português, para que vocês possam sempre aprender um cadinho mais, assim como eu aprendi muito no nosso querido Fórum Contrabaixo BR. tá? As legendas às vezes têm errinhos, porque para mim fica difícil revisar 100% da legenda, né? Eu produzo ela, mas às vezes vem com alguns errinhos, né? Mas acredito que a mensagem a gente consegue captar, beleza? Então, obrigado por ter assistido até o final. Não se esqueçam de se inscrever no canal, dar um joinha e, se quiser, se puder, tornar-se membro para dar mais um apoio aqui para o nosso canal, beleza? Fiquem bem e continuem com o groove na ponta dos dedos. Abraço!